Hello, friends. Welcome to Science Talk. I'm your host, Jim Massa. And this is an article I saw on the website EcoWatch, or ecowatch.com. And it talks about how taller Arctic plants, trees, that kind of stuff, could increase the dangerous warming feedback loop. I have to say, this kind of caught me by surprise. Now, I'm not a botanist, but the basic principles, nevertheless, are understandable. So, climate change is giving Arctic plants a growth spurt. A study published in Nature, I have more on that in a bit, examined 7 key plant characteristics over 30 years of warming at 117 locations in the Arctic or alpine tundra and found that plants were growing taller at all locations studied. So it's an international team of scientists led by Aarhus University in Denmark, as well as researchers at the University of Edinburgh and the Senckenberg Biodiversity Climate Research Center in Frankfurt, Germany. They also found that taller plant species like vernal sweetgrass, which is common in the European lowlands, are moving north to locations in Iceland and Sweden. And that was a statement issued by University of Edinburgh press release. I have discussed before how as climate warms, especially as the Arctic warms, that we're seeing a northward push of both of the flora, and which, of course, the fauna that depends on the flora. So we are seeing this northward migration. It's well documented here in Alaska, where we used to have, say, tundra vegetation or lowland grasses. We now have willows, which are short brushes. We're seeing it. Quantifying the link between environment and plant traits is critical to understanding the consequences of climate change, but such research has rarely extended into the northern hemisphere, home to the planet called the tundra ecosystem. This is the first time that a biomes are major ecosystems, biome scale study has been carried out to get to the root of the critical role that plants play in this rapidly warming part of the planet. And that's a statement by the University of Edinburgh School of Geosciences researcher Isla Myers-Smith. Florida International University ecologist Stephen Oberbauer, who was involved in the study, said the increased plant height had serious implications for the state of Arctic soil. Arctic plants are historically small because the frozen soil does not release many nutrients. Also, you have the permafrost. The ground is frozen. It is hard for roots to take hold. The only roots that can take hold are very small plants, but they don't need extensive roots. So that is another contributing factor. But as it thaws, it releases more plant food, as well as something much more dangerous: methane, nitrous oxide. Cold, wet tundra soil holds large amounts of organic carbon as peat and other forms, but as temperatures rise and the soil thaws, the organic matter decomposes, releasing CO2, methane to the atmosphere, causing further warming. We're better off if things stay frozen. That's quite a statement. Plant height could actually speed up as well as signal the warming process. Taller plants trap snow, which insulates the soil and prevents it from freezing as quickly, which means the thawing of the permafrost can go deeper, which allows, the more that the permafrost, the ground thaws out, the deeper roots can reach, bigger trees can establish themselves. And as the temperatures warm, the plant's expected to grow taller. If taller plants continue to increase at the current rate, the plant community height could increase by 20 to 60% by the end of the century, and Bjorkman of the Climate Research Center said in the University of Edinburgh press release. The research comes as concerns grow about the release of methane from, now they're saying melting, it should be thawing Arctic permafrost, which contains 30 to 50% of the world's soil carbon. A study published in August found that greenhouse gas emissions from lakes formed when thawing permafrost could more than double the estimates of how much carbon the Arctic thaw would release into the atmosphere. And this ties into the work that Igor Sinolatov and Natalia Shakova have been doing for decades. Natalia's looking at the shelf in the East Siberian Sea and other shelves around the Arctic Ocean basin. Igor has been looking at the permafrost, and there's quite a bit there, and they're concerned about what rate will the methane be released. Now, in my previous video on hysteresis, I explained how I don't include the URLs for the papers that I look at because of it's just the cost. And if you were to go there, all you see is an abstract. Here is an example. Abstract. The tundra is warming more rapidly than any other biome on Earth. Potential ramifications are far-reaching because of global feedback effects between vegetation and climate. A better understanding of how environmental factors shape plant structure and function is crucial for predicting the consequences of environmental change for ecosystem functioning. Here we explore the biome-wide relationship between temperature, moisture, 7 key plant functional traits, both across space and over 3 decades of warming at 117 tundra locations. You can say space and time, or spatiotemporal. There it is. Spatial temperature trait relationships were generally strong, but soil moisture had a marked influence on the strength and direction of these relationships, highlighting the potential important influence of changes in water availability on future trait shifts in tundra plant communities. Community height increased with warming across all sites over the past 3 decades, but other traits lagged far behind predicted rates of change. Our findings highlight the challenge of using space for time substitution to predict the functional consequences of future warming, suggest that functions that are tied closely to plant height will experience the most rapid change. They also reveal the strength with which environmental factors shape biotic communities at the coldest extremes of the planet and help to improve projections of functional changes in tundra ecosystems with climate warming. This is an example of a poorly written abstract, I'm sorry to say. It's a lot of babbling, to be quite honest. All the stuff here, they can sum it up, but we discussed blah, blah, blah in the paper. Present your findings. Just present your findings. But access options. Rent or buy the article from $8.99. Subscribe to the journal, $200. Remember I said in that last video that this is why I don't include the URL, because if you want to see this paper, you can spend $9 right now, or if you want to see all the papers that Nature puts out, spend $200. And that's for 1 year. Now you kind of get an idea of, like, all the papers I share with you, Nature, Geosciences, all, and baby, okay, I'm spending this money, folks. That's why you got to support me on Patreon. So I'm going to keep bringing you these papers. Okay, but this is why I don't put the URL, because they come to this. It's like, then you read an abstract like this, and it's like, what the fuck's this shit? Okay, I said this is, in my view, this is not a good abstract. But this, this is why I don't include the URLs. Now a critique that I have of this paper is as follows. Okay, they're talking about, the thawing, plants growing taller, the roots go deeper, the permafrost thawing, all this methane, CO2, nitrous oxide, not mentioned in this paper, is released. How does that compare to whatever CO2 the plants themselves draw down from the atmosphere in the photosynthesis process? Is it a net gain or net loss? In other words, when you look at the CO2 pulled down from the atmosphere so the plants can grow compared to the CO2, the methane, the nitrous oxide release? Is the region a carbon sink overall or a carbon source? That was not discussed in this paper, and that to me is an extremely critical oversight. And if I was a reviewer, I would have said, what's the deal with that? How does that compare? Because you've heard people, and I discussed this with you, other studies saying that trees help draw down the CO2, which is why cutting down the Amazon is bad, because now you don't have those trees drawing down the CO2, and now the Amazon becomes a carbon source instead of a sink. The Arctic used to be a carbon sink. The carbon goes in the ground, stays there, it's frozen. So now I discussed with you that overall, yes, the Arctic is a carbon source. So will taller trees, will the Arctic still be a carbon source, or does it turn the tide and now start going the other way? It might start becoming a carbon sink. Or if it still remains a carbon source, is it alleviated as to how much of a source it is? That to me was a major deficit, and I would have liked to have seen addressed. So I wanted to share this with you, so that you see what they were talking about. I wanted to show you what you encounter if you try to look at the full articles. The last one with the hysteresis, the authors were kind enough to have it be available for free. That is not the case usually. It's something like, pay $9-10 to read this particular article, or pay, in this case here for Nature, $200 a year for 12 issues. It's a $3.90 per issue. Oh yeah, that's like it's a weekly issue. Excuse me, it's not a monthly. Some publications are monthly, others are weekly. So Nature's weekly, but only $4 an issue. Yeah, it's still a lot of money to fork out at one go. So there you have it, and there you see my critique of something I felt should have been included in the analysis. But the Arctic is changing. It is changing, and fast. Thank you for your time. Hello, folks. This is Jim here with Science Talk, asking you to please subscribe to my channel and to inform others of my channel and of the work that I do. Please share to social media platforms that you use. Also, as a reminder, don't forget to click the bell so that you know when I load up more videos. Finally, I ask that you support the work that I do by becoming a patron at patreon.com. Details in the description box below. Thank you for your support.